Hi, John from York Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. A really pretty roller coaster quarter for US equities. Best performer was the Nasdaq. That was up over 16% over the quarter. S&P was up just over 7%, while the Dow was up only just around 0.4. As the Federal Reserve sort of grapples with sort of falling inflation, which is what they hoped after the rate rises over the last sort of 12 months, but obviously also as well the sort of recent banking issues as well, casting a bit of a shadow over their sort of policy decisions. But certainly some of these smaller regional banks appear to be sort of seeing some deposits coming back in there, and more importantly, less deposits are leaving. So while the crisis certainly isn't over, it certainly seems to be abating a little bit. And like I say, there is a little bit more confidence returning to some of those sort of smaller, medium sort of regional banks in the US. Now on the inflation front, again, that data appears to be sort of pointing to a sort of a falling numbers there. Personal consumer expenditure was around sort of plus 0.3 for February, and that puts it on a year-on-year basis around sort of 5%, which is certainly well off its recent highs of sort of last June. Now on the back of that, interest rate, certainly the 10-year sort of backed off quite considerably. That's currently around 335. 2-year is just over 4%. Now again, you look at that 2-year 2 months ago, that was trading over 5%. Interesting as well, historically, April is a pretty good month for US equities. Since 1950, the average return for April has been around 1.9% on the upside. Now on the political front, obviously the big news is President Trump's indictment. He's now facing criminal charges, 34 charges, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how that sort of plays through. Because in typical Trump style, he's sort of come out and said, the indictment, there is no case there. They haven't even outlined what the charges are. He's been charged on 34 different cases. Now, oil has spiked higher after sort of OPEC Plus, which does include sort of Russia, etc. That's voted to sort of cut production, and that's taken oil back above $80 a barrel. Which is obviously quite good from Russia's perspective because they're needing to fund that war in Ukraine, which is just dragging on and on and on. They've cut the production by around 3.5 million barrels a day. Interesting in the UK again, the FTSE for the quarter was up just over 1%. But interesting as well on the sort of foreign exchanges, the British pound is close to a 10-month high. Now again, inflation in the Eurozone is sort of falling as well from its recent highs. Latest read on that was 6.9% versus 7.1%, which was expected. Equities had a pretty reasonable quarter, up around 7%. But still got the ongoing unrest in France on the pension reforms, and that's just going to be interesting to see how that does play through. Because certainly France is still well behind the curve in terms of sort of retirement age. He's only looking at putting it up from 62 to 64. Most other countries have at least 65, if not 67. Interesting in Australia, the Reserve Bank voted to leave rates on hold. They've certainly taken a sort of softly cautious approach to sort of rate increases. Because while inflation is falling a little bit in Australia, they're getting quite a boost as well from sort of the sort of Chinese sort of reopening and really creating a pretty good demand there for minerals and resources. And that's obviously helping the Australian economy greatly. Interesting, the Chinese non-manufacturing PMI is increasing, currently 58.2 versus expected 56.4. Now here in New Zealand, a big surprise from the Reserve Bank. Not they put rates up. Most analysts and economists were expecting them to increase rates by 25 basis points. They actually put it up by 50 basis points, taking the OCR to 5.25. So that's the 11th consecutive rate increase. Taking rates from 0.25 to 5.25 now. That's a pretty big move. And it's obviously having its sort of impact on the house prices. They're still sort of falling, but also as well, sort of building permits as well as sort of falling as a little bit as well. They were down 9% in February. And also as well, inflation here in New Zealand isn't really falling. It's sort of more plateauing out at present, around that sort of 7%. And certainly some further inflationary pressures coming through as the government look to increase minimum wage to $22.70. And then in September, the living wage will go up to $26. And then in September, the living wage will go up to $26. It's probably fair to say as well that the new Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins' sort of honeymoon period is sort of coming to an end, facing a little bit of pressure and criticism for his handling of a recent sort of cabinet issues in terms of staff. And obviously now into April with the election, in October, creeping ever closer to that election date. With business confidence falling and cost of living sort of pressures still out there, it's just going to be very interesting to see the next sort of couple of opinion polls. Now, obviously, that hike in the OCR is good news for savers. And also as well, obviously into April now, KiwiSaver balances are coming up to the end of their year at the end of June, and just interesting to keep an eye on those sort of balances, just to make sure you contributed enough to get that government contribution. So if you are looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.